Now, I'm a big fan of the Mission Impossible series, James Bond series. I'm a sucker for masculine, kick ass heroes, death defying stunts, exotic locations, and beautiful ass kicking women. So I love both those franchises. But we'll talk about James Bond another day. Right now, the focus is on Mission Impossible, the new Mission Impossible film, Final Reckoning. I give it a B plus. I thought the film had a lot of heart. However, there were some things that I guess you want to say, I feel indifferent towards. There wasn't much in the film that made me like that I strongly dislike. There's like a handful of things, but overall, what really counts is that the film had a lot of heart. And most importantly, you feel like the stakes are super high in this film. They feel really, really high. You feel like the entire world is at risk. And I think they really did an outstanding job at making the threat feel real for the audience, that is. And it really resonated for me. Out of all the Mission Impossible films, I honestly want to say that this one has the most heart. It really does, in my opinion. However, that doesn't make it my favorite Mission Impossible film. There are, I think, a lot of better other ones, right? Like, I think so far, honestly, the first Mission Impossible, directed by Brian De Palma, is my favorite. Being a big Brian De Palma fan, the guy that directed Scarface, Carlito's Way, The Untouchables, so many great films. Blowout. I mean, the list just goes on and on. Brian De Palma did something really spectacular with that first film. He made a true spy thriller. If you really pay attention, I think there is only like one gunshot in that entire film. And despite that, despite there not being so much action as there is now in the contemporary films, it was still really engaging and fully engrossing and really intense. And I was really invested. It was suspenseful. And that's because Brian De Palma is a master of suspense. And I really love that first film. Now, that being said, Mission Impossible 2 was just god awful. I'm a big John Woo fan. I love John Woo. Love Hard Boiled. Love The Killer. Love A Better Tomorrow. But he was the wrong guy to make a Mission Impossible film. I really think it was just really odd how they just, I guess you want to say, overcompensated by just making the second one a full out action film. I mean, it didn't even really feel like a spy film, but I hate that movie. I hate Mission Impossible 2. Nothing against John Woo, but it just felt just like a total deviation from the first film. And that being said, Mission Impossible 2 is literally the only bad film out of this entire series. This film series is outstanding. I love the Mission Impossible series. I mean, that's a great track record. To come out with what, 8, 9 films, however much it is, and only have one truly bad film under your belt, that's spectacular. Now, in regards to Mission Impossible 3, that's when things got back on track. J.J. Abrams, who I'm not a fan of, all the followers of this channel know that I kind of despise J.J. Abrams. But you know what? I got to give props where props are due. And J.J. Abrams did an outstanding job with Mission Impossible 3. Now, Mission Impossible 3 isn't, I wouldn't say I put it up there with the best of the lot. I give Mission Impossible 3 a B plus. So let's just say I put Final Reckoning in the same category as I would Mission Impossible 3. Because after Mission Impossible 3, literally all the films are A's. So Mission Impossible 1, A. Mission Impossible 2, D. Mission Impossible 3, B. And then Ghost Protocol, A. Rogue Nation, A. Fallout, A. Dead Reckoning, A. And then lastly, Final Reckoning, like I said, was a B. But yeah, why I didn't think Mission Impossible 3 was an impeccable A plus film. I liked it. I really like the villain. The villain was great. You know, rest in peace to Philip Seymour Hoffman. He did an outstanding job. I love the return of there being that ensemble piece. You know, the team really felt like something from Mission Impossible. However, I just didn't like the ending per se. I didn't like this whole thing with the wife showing up and being the one to kill the main baddie and the whole thing with Ethan and his wife. I always had reservations about. And I was really pleased that after this film, they kind of made amends with that by putting the wife on the back burner and making her having to basically abandon their marriage because it's just way too costly. I mean, it's too much of a risk because Ethan is this agent, this secret spy agent, and he has so many enemies. And that's the main thing I never liked about Mission Impossible 3, but I'm glad that they took the story in a sensible direction. In regards to my criticism, not that they listened to me, but I'm just saying, like, I think it was great that they didn't keep it that way. You know, the status quo with Ethan having a wife at home waiting for him, you know, like that's silly. And I'm glad the rest of the series was able to resolve that. Now, Ghost Protocol, amazing film, man. Ghost Protocol was badass. Then Rogue Nation, badass. Fallout, badass. Dead Reckoning, badass. So all those films are just A plus films. Amazing, amazing spy films. And so let's just talk about the latest film. Let's just talk about Dead Reckoning and Final Reckoning, because we have to talk about Dead Reckoning since Final Reckoning is like the part 2 of that. Now, when I saw Dead Reckoning, I was blown away. And you know, it's like after so many home runs, I went into Dead Reckoning. You had 3 home runs in a row, right? Ghost Protocol, Rogue Nation, Fallout. I go into Dead Reckoning kind of like, I remember feeling like, is it going to be good? You know, just kind of like this series, is this series gassed out or what? And then I saw it and I was like, holy smokes, this movie is amazing. It just never stops with Tom Cruise, man. Tom Cruise is an amazing filmmaker. He knows what the people want. He knows how to deliver good movies. Look no further than Top Gun 2, which was one of the greatest cinema going experiences of my life because I saw it in 4DX. And that's the perfect film to see in 4DX. You know, I'm talking like when the seat moves like a roller coaster. You got flares lighting up in the theater with the gunshots. You got snow falling from the ceiling for the snow scenes. You got water being sprayed on your face for the scenes on the boats. I mean, smoke coming out of the walls. I mean, it was amazing. I mean, it was the perfect film for that. And the ending and all the stuff and the jets and all that, it just reminded me of, you know, the original Star Wars, the Death Star trench run kind of stuff. It was amazing. So anyway, yeah, Tom Cruise knows how to make outstanding films. Dead Reckoning really blew me away. I absolutely loved that film. One thing, I just want to say one thing that I particularly loved about that film was just all the kick-ass ladies in that movie. Like, there was just so many kick-ass women in that movie, and I absolutely loved it. Absolutely loved it. And I really love the character Paris, the French assassin that works for Gabriel. She was badass in that movie, man. Absolutely badass. And the character of Gabriel, he was so much better in Dead Reckoning. So let's talk about Final Reckoning. Now, some of the misgivings I have for this film, and I don't want to say they're major, but let's get started on that. So I thought the film had the most heart out of all the films in the entire Mission Impossible franchise. Now, in regards to my misgivings, look, I felt like there was something a little off as far as the villain. Like, I get the entity, basically the entity is like Skynet for the Mission Impossible series. So literally the entity is Skynet. That's what I kept thinking throughout the entire duration of this film. Like, oh, this is like Skynet. And that's fine. No big deal there. It's an artificial intelligence that wants to wipe out mankind. And the Mission Impossible team are trying to stop it. However, in regards to Gabriel, the human villain, like, he was barely in the movie. I mean, and I guess if this is a part 2, and you really feel there's a necessity to see part 1, and Gabriel played a pivotal role in that. And Gabriel's barely in the movie, but I mean, and when he's in it, he does a good job, right? But I just felt like, I don't know, it just felt like the villain being 75% it was like this construct, the AI, the entity, and then 25% the villain is the human character, Gabriel. It made the narrative feel a little disjointed because the entity could be everywhere and all this stuff. But at the same time, I felt like the entity wasn't that much of a threat as far as what we actually see occur in the film, especially compared with Dead Reckoning. I felt like in Dead Reckoning, the entity was like making things happen, like, bow. And in this one, it was just basically the threat of the entity. It was all about the threat. And again, Gabriel was in this movie very little. And I wish he was in it more. But you know what? This is not a big deal, right? This is not a big deal. These are just some observations. Now, another thing we have to talk about is just the total retconning of this entire franchise. So this film tries to tie in together all the Mission Impossible films like one big narrative. And you know what? I'm indifferent to it. Now, I know there's some fans out there that absolutely loathe it, but I am indifferent to it. I don't love it and I don't hate it. A part of me does feel, and I will admit this, a part of me does feel like it was absolutely unnecessary. Because every Mission Impossible film that came out so far, more or less, aside from the whole like Ethan and his wife stuff, has felt like a standalone film. And now Final Reckoning wants to tie it all together in one big narrative. And you know what? I will give some credit to the Mission Impossible series, Final Reckoning, in regards to, at the very least, there are no continuity errors. And I appreciate the hell out of that. Because you look at the retconning in Star Wars, you look at the retconning in the Fox X-Men movies, and the narrative is just, the continuity is just terrible, especially in X-Men. Now, you all know I'm a big Star Wars fan, but hey, man, I'm not going to be unbiased. I'm not going to be biased. I'm going to admit it, man. Some of this retconning in Star Wars is just absurd, and it goes all the way back to Return of the Jedi with making Leia Luke's sister. Like, I love Return of the Jedi, but give me a break. Like, come on, man. And then the next retcon. Oh, Qui-Gon Jinn found Anakin, not Obi-Wan. And then next retcon. Oh, Boba Fett's dad is the template for the clones, and so forth and so forth and so forth. And those aren't even the worst ones compared to what Disney's doing. Just look at the Obi-Wan Kenobi series and the Ahsoka series. Now it's like retcon and Rebels and Ezra and Ahsoka were around the same time as Luke. And it's just like, oh man, it's just stupid. And then the Fox X-Men movies, that is just the worst of the worst. That's just like the worst of the worst. Like as far as continuity errors up the ass, like just laughably bad. Now, talking about Mission Impossible, I find it really commendable that there are no continuity errors. You really feel like the filmmakers scrutinize the hell out of all the films in this series to make sure that it made sense. So that's Tom Cruise and Christopher McQuarrie. Thank you guys. Because one thing that I hate the most is when retcons destroy the continuity of the story. I absolutely hate that. I hate it. And even though some of these retcons feel contrived, they feel forced, at the very least, they don't contradict the story and they don't have continuity errors. All right. At least as far as my initial viewing. I've only seen the film once, but there are some things that are contrived, and I'll give you one example right here. So going back to Mission Impossible 3, and you know what? I think it's an admirable effort for Final Reckoning to try to tie all these films together retroactively, because you damn well know when they made Mission Impossible 1, they weren't thinking of Final Reckoning. And you damn well know when they made all these films except Dead Reckoning that they were not thinking of Final Reckoning. So in Mission Impossible 3, the whole thing with the rabbit's foot, now, so you damn well know that the rabbit's foot in Mission Impossible 3 was supposed to be some kind of biological biobomb or biological weapon or virus. But now it's been retconned into being the entity all this time. Does it break continuity? No. Does it feel forced? Yeah. But you know what? It's okay because, again, it doesn't break continuity. And you know what? I'm like, hey, whatever. Whatever's clever, man. Again, I'm more indifferent to it. It's not that I love it. It's not that I hate it. Maybe as time goes on, I'll appreciate it more. But what I do appreciate is that there's no continuity errors. So you have that. Another thing that I really enjoyed about this film was just how they have this kind of quote that was taken from my favorite film of all time. Check out my cinema thesis video for Lawrence of Arabia. The whole notion that nothing is written. I absolutely love that. And that is like the theme throughout this film. Nothing is written, right? And that is the central theme of Lawrence of Arabia too. So when I hear that, it really, really touches a soft spot in my heart. And I really appreciate that in this film. Now, I do want to talk about how the retcon that the one character that was basically in Dead Reckoning. So I gotta remember this guy's name. So basically, Jon Voight's son. So Jon Voight's son. So who was Jon Voight? Jon Voight was the original main character in the Mission Impossible television series. So that guy turned out to be the villain in the original Mission Impossible film. Okay? So What does that mean? Okay. So this Briggs character is Jon Voight's son. And I thought that was interesting. I really did. I thought that was really interesting that Briggs turned out to be the son of the Jon Voight character from Mission Impossible 1. Did they have that plan from the very beginning? Of course not. You know what I mean? Of course not. It's a retcon. But again, I thought it was interesting because that was kind of a controversial thing, you know? It was kind of a controversial thing to make Jim Phelps. So I'm sorry, I kept saying Jon Voight. Jon Voight is the actor. All right. So Briggs is the son of Jim Phelps, who was the main character in the Mission Impossible television series. Now, the controversial thing was making the main character of the Mission Impossible television series the villain for the first Mission Impossible film. So that was controversial. But you know what? I enjoyed the twist. I didn't find it offensive. And like I said, I think making this Briggs character, Jim Phelps' son, really interesting. That was one of the retcons that I actually enjoyed. And I had no problem with that whatsoever. So, yeah, that was really cool. Some things that I didn't like about this film. Obviously, okay, let's talk about the action. Obviously, the airplane sequence was amazing. Absolutely loved it. And I've even heard some criticisms from people saying that, oh, it's the same kind of setup as Fallout, like that kind of like robs it of anything. And I'm like, so what? It's still badass. Like, get over yourself. It was amazing. That part where Ethan rips off Gabriel's arm was just like amazing. The acting from Gabriel, from the actor that plays Gabriel, was just outstanding. Like he was like, ah! Like you really felt like his arm got ripped off right there, like snapped back in half. Like he went from being like this Mr. Tough Guy attitude to a little bitch really quick. And that was a great, great send off. Okay. Now let's talk about some negative criticisms. Talking about this airplane sequence, what the hell was that whole, like, so when Gabriel said to Tom Cruise, to Ethan, I have the last parachute, and then he dies, and then all of a sudden, Tom Cruise has 2 fucking parachutes. I don't know what that was about. Like, it would have been fine if Gabriel hadn't said that line. Like, why would he say that line and then you contradict what he just said by Tom Cruise pulling 2 parachutes out of his ass? And there was even a moment in which you thought that maybe Ethan died, and then all of a sudden he had a parachute and lives. Now, I'm happy he lived because I don't want the main character to die. I don't want this to be a no time to die scenario. The last James Bond film, which was a complete piece of shit. Like, I hate that movie. Like, I don't want to see fucking James Bond die. I don't want to see Ethan die. Like, that's bullshit. Like, no. So thank you for that. But the whole like line about him having only 1 parachute and then Ethan having 2 of them, that was really weird. I don't know why they did that. Like, that was an unnecessary error that didn't have to be in there. Another thing that I kind of don't like was, and this kind of started with Fallout, and it's the action. It's getting to be too over the top, particularly in my opinion, Fallout in this film. Some of the action is over the top. Now, in Fallout, there's a scene where they're fighting in the bathroom, and then one of the guys they're fighting rips the pipes out of the faucet. It's like, dude, these guys are just like normal human beings, man. But sometimes they come through like they got the super soldier serum, like they're Captain America or some shit. And it's just like, it's just ridiculous. And I only say that because of the suspension of disbelief. Like, is the action choreographed impeccably? Of course. Am I entertained? Of course. But the logical side of me is like, come on, man, this guy isn't superhuman. Okay, talking about Final Reckoning. The sequence where the underwater sequence when Ethan is in the submarine, going to the submarine, that was really intense. But the moment he took off his suit, I was like, oh, come on, man. Like, dude, you would fucking die in like 1 minute. And I'm not talking about the decompression thing. They already set that up, that it was going to be like impossible and all that. And you totally expected him to die and them to resuscitate him. Like, I get that. But I'm talking about the freezing fucking cold, man. Like, the dude comes out basically in his swimming trunks, man. In the freezing cold, the Arctic, you know what I'm saying? Underwater, submerged with submarines and shit. And it's just like, oh, come on. So not only is he going to survive the cold, the freezing, but he's also going to survive the decompression. It's just too much, in other words. It's too much. It's ridiculous for him to, like, it was too much, man. The decompression was enough for my suspension of disbelief, but for him to have no suit on, that was ridiculous. He would have freezed to death in like 1 minute. It was ridiculous. Another thing, that whole sequence of the Mission Impossible team being in the cabin in the Arctic or wherever, that was my least favorite part in the movie. I don't know. Things felt disjointed. And again, this is just a minor criticism, even though it may sound like more, but the time where Ethan is like separated from the team, that's when the film started. It kind of felt a little disjointed. Not that I was not entertained or I was bored or there was illogical stuff going on, but it just felt disjointed. So I will say that. Now, I love the sequence when Luther dies. That was very touching. And again, that contributes to the heart of this film. This film has a lot of heart. You really feel like the stakes are high in this film. And I love this whole notion, like, I will see you again. You know, that really, really was touching stuff. And again, with all the retcons, I know some people don't like the retcons. Some people have compared the whole retconning to what Spectre did for the Daniel Craig James Bond films. And you know what? I don't see anything wrong with that. You know, I like Spectre. You know what? Okay. What was wrong with Spectre wasn't that Blofeld and Spectre were behind the events of Casino Royale, Quantum of Solace, and Skyfall. That's not what was wrong with Spectre. What was wrong with Spectre was that they made Blofeld James Bond's foster brother. That was fucking stupid. That was just like, what? Completely unnecessary. That's the definition of contrived right there. That. Making Blofeld James Bond's foster brother. Like, oh, what a coincidence. Your long lost foster brother is behind everything. You know, like that's what was wrong with that movie. It wasn't that it retconned the previous 3 films, you know, or retcon Blofeld and Spectre being the puppet master to the events of the first 3 films. I actually like that. And that's in line with Spectre, man. That's the same thing that happened with the original Sean Connery James Bond films. It was the same thing. So I don't understand that criticism whatsoever. But, you know, that's kind of what they did here, you know, with Final Reckoning. And, you know, I don't think it's that big of a deal, really. Now, I will say this. There was a time while watching this film, Final Reckoning, where I felt like it was just a little bit convoluted. There were parts in the film where I was like trying to tie everything together, but in the end, it all made sense. But I just had to state that because it's a long movie. It's 3 hours long. And I feel like maybe it could have been 15 minutes shorter, but it's dragged out a little bit, you know, and it's not too bad. I was fully engaged throughout the entire duration of the film, but I just had to state there were times where the film kind of borderline on convoluted. I really enjoyed the film. It was entertaining. Like I said, there were some things I had misgivings about, some things I'm indifferent to, but overall, what makes the movie watchable, enjoyable, and a good entry in the Mission Impossible series was that it had a lot of heart. It has the most heart out of all the Mission Impossible films, in my opinion. And for a movie that's trying to tie everything together, even though it feels unnecessary at some times, the fact that it has heart and soul is really probably the most important thing, man. Because like it could have no errors, but if the film had no heart, I just feel like, I don't know, man. I just wanted to walk away feeling satisfied as much as I did, even though there were some things that I had misgivings and are indifferent to. Now, people are trying to say that this is the last Mission Impossible movie. Yeah, right. Yeah, right, man. You know, I really think that that's what they were trying to go for here. And no, it's not going to be the last Mission Impossible film. They're going to keep this series going. Maybe it'll be like the last film in which Ethan is the central character, but they're going to keep this series going. You know, now my opinion, I love these movies. I think Tom Cruise still does a good job. He still looks youthful. He still can kick ass. And I want to see more Tom Cruise Mission Impossible films. And that's, again, kind of the thing that I'm indifferent to. Like, why go out of your way to try to tie everything together like this is some kind of send-off for the series when it really shouldn't be? So that's my review for Final Reckoning, B+. The whole series goes like this: Mission Impossible 1, A+, my favorite. Mission Impossible 2, D, sucks, but it's entertaining. Mission Impossible 3, B+, back on track, but wasn't really a fan of the whole Ethan's wife thing. Then you got Mission Impossible 4, 5, 6, 7, A+, home run after home run. And then, like I said, this film, B+. Love this series. Amazing.